Hi guys! I'm going to continue reading out of the 100 Dresses for you today. Last time you heard the chapter that was called The 100 Dresses. Remember, they had a contest at school and everybody thought Peggy was going to win, but sure enough, Wanda actually won with her beautiful drawings of 100 dresses. At the end of the chapter, we listened as there was a letter read aloud to the class explaining that Wanda would not be coming back to school and the reasons why. That letter was written by her mother. And at the very end of the chapter, we read about Maddie and Peggy and kind of what they thought after, or how they were feeling after listening to that letter. So, this is chapter 6. It is called Up on Boggins Heights. If you remember, Boggins Heights is the area where Wanda lived, and at the beginning of this book, we heard about what the other kids in school thought about that area of the town. So this is Up on Boggins Heights. The two girls hurried out of the building, up the street, toward Boggins Heights, the part of town that wore such a forbidding air on this kind of November afternoon, drizzly, damp, and dismal. Well, at least, said Peggy gruffly, I never did call her a foreigner or make fun of her name. I never thought she had the sense to know we were making fun of her anyway. I thought she was too dumb. And gee, look how she can draw. I thought I could draw. Maddie could say nothing. All she hoped was they would find Wanda, just so she'd be able to tell her they were sorry they had picked on her, and just to say how wonderful the whole school thought she was, and please not to move away, and everybody would be nice. She and Peggy would fight anybody who was not nice. Maddie fell to imagining a story in which she and Peggy assailed any bully who might be going to pick on Wanda. Petronsky Onsky, somebody would yell, and she and Peggy would pounce on the guilty one. For a time, Maddie had consoled herself with these thoughts, but soon they vanished, and again she felt unhappy and wished everything could be nice, the way it was before any of them had started to make fun of Wanda. Brrr! How drab and cold and cheerless it was up here in the heights. In the summertime, the woods, the sumac, and the ferns that grew along the brook on the side of the road were lush and made this a beautiful walk on Sunday afternoons. But now it did not seem beautiful. The brook had shrunk to the merest trickle, and today's drizzle sharpened the outlines of the rusty tin cans, old shoes, and forlorn remnants of a big black umbrella in the bed of the brook. The two girls hurried on. They hoped to get to the top of the hill before dark. Otherwise, they were not certain they could find Wanda's house. At last, puffing and panting, they rounded the top of the hill. The first house, that old rickety one, belonged to Old Man Svensson. Peggy and Maddie hurried past it almost on tiptoes. Somebody said once that Old Man Svensson had shot a man. Others said, nonsense. He's an old good-for-nothing. He wouldn't hurt a flea. But, true or not, the girls breathed more freely as they rounded the corner. It was too cold and drizzly for Old Man Svensson to be in his customary chair, tilted against the house, chewing and spitting tobacco juice. Even his dog was nowhere in sight, and had not barked at the girls from wherever he might be. I think that's where the Petronskys live, said Maddie, pointing to a little white house with lots of chicken coops at the side of it. Wisps of old grass stuck up here and there along the pathway, like thin, wet kittens. The house and its sparse little yard looked shabby, but clean. It reminded Maddie of Wanda's one dress, her faded blue cotton dress, shabby but clean. There was not a sign of life about the house except for a yellow cat, half grown, crouching on the one small step close to the front door. It leapt timidly, with a small cry halfway up a tree, when the girls came into the yard. Peggy knocked firmly on the door, but there was no answer. She and Maddie went around to the backyard and knocked there. Still, there was no answer. "Wanda!" called Peggy. They listened sharply, but only a deep silence pressed against their eardrums. There was no doubt about it. The Petronskis were gone. "Maybe they just went away for a little while and haven't really left with their furniture yet," suggested Maddie, hopefully. Maddie was beginning to wonder how she could bear the hard fact that Wanda had actually gone and that she might never be able to make amends. Amends means to make it right, to be able to have the chance to apologize for what they had done. "Well," said Peggy, "let's see if the door is open." They cautiously turned the knob of the front door. It opened easily, for it was a light thing and looked as though it furnished but frail protection against the cold winds that blew up here in the wintertime. The little square room that the door opened into was empty. There was absolutely nothing left in it, and in the corner was a closet with its door wide open, which was also empty too. Maddie wondered what it had held before the Petronskis moved out. And she thought of Wanda saying, "Sure, 100 dresses all lined up in the closet." Well, anyway, real and imaginary dresses alike were gone. The Petronskis were gone. And now, how could she and Peggy tell Wanda anything? Maybe the teacher knew where she had moved to. Maybe Old Man Svensson knew. They might knock on his door and ask on the way down. Or the post office might know. If they wrote a letter, Wanda might get it because the post office might forward it. Feeling very downcast and discouraged, the girls closed the door and started for home. Coming down the road, way, way off in the distance, through the drizzle, they could see the water of the bay, gray and cold. "Do you suppose that was their cat, and they forgot her?" asked Peggy. But the cat wasn't anywhere around now, and the girls turned the bend, and as the girls turned the bend, they saw her crouching under the dilapidated wooden chair in front of Old Man Svensson's house. So perhaps the cat belonged to him. They lost their courage about knocking on his door and asking when the Petronskis had left. And anyway, goodness, here was Old Man Svensson himself coming up the road. Everything about Svensson was yellow: his house, his cat, his trousers, his drooping mustache and tangled hair, his hound lopping behind him, his dog, and the long streams of tobacco juice he expertly shot between his scattered yellow teeth. The two girls drew over to the side of the path as they hurried by. When they were a good way past, they stopped. "Hello, Mr. Svensson," yelled Peggy. "When did the Petronskis move?" Old Man Svensson turned around, but said nothing. Finally, he did answer, but his words were unintelligible, and the two girls turned and ran down the hill as fast as they could. Old Man Svensson looked after them for a moment, and then went on up the hill, muttering to himself and scratching his head. When they were back down on Oliver Street again, the girls stopped running. They still felt disconsolate, and Maddie wondered if she were going to be unhappy about Wanda and the 100 dresses forever. Nothing would ever seem good to hear her again, because just when she was about to enjoy something, like going for a hike with Peggy to look for bayberries or sliding down Barley Hill, she'd bump right smack into the thought that she had made Wanda Petronsky move away. Well, anyway, said Peggy, she's gone now. So, what can we do? Besides, when I was asking her about all of her dresses, she probably was getting good ideas for her drawings. She might not even have won the contest otherwise. Maddie carefully turned this idea over in her head, for if there were anything in it, she would not have to feel so bad. But that night, she could not go to sleep. She thought about Wanda and her faded blue dress, and the little house that she had lived in, and Old Man Svensson living a few steps away, and she thought of the glowing pictures those 100 dresses made, all lined up in the classroom. At last, Maddie sat up in bed and pressed her forehead tight in her hands and really thought hard. This was the hardest thinking she had ever done. After a long, long time, she reached an important conclusion. She was never going to stand by and say nothing again. If she ever heard anybody picking on someone because they were funny looking or because they had strange names, she would speak up, even if it meant losing Peggy's friendship. She had no way of making things right with Wanda, but from now on, she would never make anybody else so unhappy again. Finally, all tired out, Maddie fell asleep. All right, so we only have one chapter left. I am wondering how this book is going to end, and I want to know how you think it's going to end. So make sure you let me know in your Google Doc that you are hopefully writing and keeping track of. So I'm curious to see what you guys think about how the book will end. See you next time. Bye.